I'm going to ask Lindsay and Frank if they'd be good enough to come up on stage and answer questions. We will have a roving microphone for anybody who's got a question. So Lindsay and Frank, if you wouldn't mind joining me on the stage. Thank you.
I'd like to take up on what Lindsay was saying regarding how we need to get something going with our communities and so forth. Last Friday I was at a state government organised economic development forum to talk about regional economic plans, and one of the chief advisors to the government got up and talked about the forestry industry, and what he said was to forget about the forestry industry, that's dead because of lack of supply. And I thought, why is he saying that? I said, oh yes, okay, we'll shut down the wood chip mill so there's no supply out of there, can't get logs out of the forest, there's no supply out of there, so maybe he's right there. And then he went on to say that there's no innovation in the forest industry. And I thought, have you been down and had a look at Taran's operation? I mean, they've even got cogeneration there where they use the waste to generate electricity. And the pulp mill would be good innovation if it was allowed to get off its feet. And then he gets up and says, but we can have saviour in the wine industry. We can, if we get $140 million invested in the state, we can create another 2,000 jobs. Well, not a good bit of leverage on statistics, I thought, but anyway, I thought, who's going to invest $140 million in the state when you're saying this on one hand and that on the other hand? And so I guess the real question is do we need to do a KFC going around our communities here to get them to actually speak up so that we can sort of get some say over our minority group that seems to be taking over the state?
I honestly believe that the aspect of KFC comes and reconfirms people's opinion of what needs to be done, and it's that little stepping stone that pushes them over the line. One of the biggest weaknesses in politicians today, and I've outlived 8 premiers in Victoria. I'm still here and they've come and gone. The old-fashioned premier used to sit and listen, one-on-one. Now you have them having 2 or 3 highly academic individuals that get caught up with paralysis by analysis, and they've never lived any part of the worldly experience of hard yakka. Today we need politicians that are prepared to back their own confidence. Did you ever ask your mother-in-law, could you take her daughter to bed? Did you? You didn't. You put the proposition to the person that had the right to answer, one way or the other. My aspect to it today is yes or no, stop or go. And the politicians today don't have the comfort zone. So they need the little minders around them to help. I don't know how many pollies we've got here today, and I'll say it to them to make sure they hear what I say. I hope that answers the question. But we're nothing more than giving people the confidence to back up what they thought they needed to do.
Thank you. Craig, I think we have a question down here. Andrew, sorry.
Yes. Craig Clifford from Incat Company in Hobart. 2 questions if I would. Firstly, I'd like to take up your offer. We are the builder of the largest high-speed craft in Tasmania, and where you left off, Mr. Bacon, Mr. Fox, would very happily take it up with you. Secondly, and perhaps more relevantly, the model on Bass Strait in terms of transport. I know both you gentlemen have had a lot of experience with getting goods to and from Tasmania, particularly from Tasmania. Be interested in your views on transport across that stretch of water.
You want me to go first, Frankie? Okay, good. You stick to your grapes and I'll stick to the trucks. One of the problems with all of Australia is not just characteristic of Tasmania. On the mainland, every state was built with a different railway gauge. In Tasmania, you created a port for every little community
along the east coast, which is not economical. Now, Charlie here can verify some of the things that I'm about to say. In the movement of containers from China, from Shanghai through to Long Beach, California, the current rate for a container is about $400. That's because the ships take 24,000 containers. Now today, from Melbourne to Tasmania, you're looking at 2,000 plus, Charlie? How much?
800.
Is that, geez, I'll have to talk to you about a deal. Those toll pricks have been getting me. Okay, well, let's look at the difference. Charlie's number was 800. Do you know the difference between Melbourne to Tasmania and Shanghai to Long Beach, California? Maybe 30 times the difference. Yet Long Beach, California, 30 times the difference is half the price of going from one country to another. In places like Long Beach, California, the container ship comes in, they unload it, they put it on a train, they double stack the containers and they take them all the way through to Chicago and then break them out and then distribute them all along the eastern coast and the Midwest. Another example that's really applicable to Tasmania is Milan and Genoa. The ship comes into Genoa, they double stack the containers on the train, run them about 75, 80 mile into Milan, then they distribute them through southern Europe and, northern Europe and southern Italy by road, once they go to Milan. The infrastructure that is needed in Tasmania is to pick a port, probably Bell Bay, deep water port, double stack the containers on a rail system, run them down to Hobart, and then distribute from Hobart somewhere up towards Launceston in exactly the same manner. Now, you don't have to invest this, you just need a simple test. Most of my customers start with a letter C. Coles, Coca-Cola, Carlton United, Castrol. And there's a couple of cash to cover all the cash. Make a C with your right hand. Come on, hold it up. It's not hard to do. C with your right hand. Come on now, hold it up, Mr. Mayor. No, the other one. Some fellas are always difficult. Hold it up. Right, now touch your chin. Come on. What did I tell you to do? What did I tell you to do? Touch your what? Oh! There you are, there's a fella that's either blind or a lawyer. They're the only ones that normally touch their chin. You need to go and see these things. So whoever the Port Authority people are, whoever the government people are that are responsible, don't worry about reading. Don't worry about listening. Look, how many of you read a sex manual before you made love? Or did you fondle your way through it?
Lindsay, I know you wouldn't be one to dodge a hard question, and it's yes or no, stop or go. You haven't answered Craig's question.
When you get to 75, you forget what it was. Craig, would you repeat that?
Well, I think you might be referring to whether you're going to buy a catamaran for Bass Strait. More appropriately, do you think the current model, and I think your answer previously is the current model is not right and we need to fix it?
Historically, you've had something that was more advanced than anything else in the world. And we looked at it to go down to Gippsland from here, because that would be the quickest way across, and rather than run up the bay, there was a benefit to that. But you have to have something that can go through all weather, and there's nothing more treacherous than this stretch of water on a bad day. On a good day, it's fantastic. And on a good day, you'd be able to do exactly what was needed day-by-day meeting scheduling. But you've got to find something that doesn't create too many waves. No, I'm not going to give it back to you. I'll give it to Frankie.
There's a question over here from Darren, I think.
Gentlemen, firstly, can I say thanks for being here. I've had the pleasure of being to a couple of the KFC meetings and I've enjoyed them. But I think I said to Frank earlier, I think one of the real questions is he was talking about Geelong and how they went through a very difficult time, and they've certainly come out of it with football and some investments locally. But I think, like I've said to you, Lindsay, as well, I've said to Simon Crean, that one fundamental thing that's different than Tasmania that I don't think outside the state people really understand is that we're an island. We don't have a freeway where there's 4 million people up the road where we can drive to. And it's the biggest challenge in our goods and our services that we try to get out of the state. And we're a sovereign state, like everyone else, so we should have the same exactly as every other state does. So radically, I challenge both of you to talk to your politician friends, as well as your colleagues, that Tasmania should be looked at differently. It should be absolutely looked differently because it is different than any other state. The biggest challenge we have is getting the goods and services out. We can't put it on a truck and just without putting it on a boat, or we have to fly it in air freight. And you talk about years ago, I remember sitting with Jim Bacon a number of years ago and said, look, there's a lot of businesses in town, we can't do business in the state anymore. It was $600 to fly to Melbourne for a 1-hour flight. Now we don't have that, and unfortunately we don't control it. So the challenge is that's one of them, that we actually have to try to get the goods and services out of the state at the same cost that you do in Geelong or you do in Sydney or anywhere else. The second is population. Now, if we had another 500,000 people here tomorrow, we wouldn't even be sitting here talking about how things can be difficult and challenging. I think at the end of the day, we realise that population is a real issue. And that's something else that we should be just trying to focus on, is to getting people to come here. But there's some people in the room here, I'm sure, that wouldn't want to see another 500,000 people here tomorrow because they like it the way it is now. So the real challenge I really wanted to say is to take away that we are different, we have water around it, it's very difficult getting produce out of the state without paying a higher price. And we've already seen it in Victoria where, you know, the ports are actually increasing their prices and it's putting challenges on business. So all of the other stuff, I couldn't agree with you more. We're very positive. There's a lot of innovative businesses in the state, and they're all doing the best to grow the business outside the state and employ people. But we need the politicians to understand, to get our goods and services out, there's a cost to it. And regardless of what the produce is or what the product is, that is still a cost that we have to bear. And as a sovereign state, we should have the same rights as any other state to actually get those goods and services out. Thank you.
Sure. Darren, I understand exactly where you're coming from, but I'll still go back and say that the best help you're going to get is from within your own population down here. And if you approach the government with the right story, because of what you're doing and what you can actually prove that's happening down here, you're going to get a better ear from government. And to get to that extra 500,000 people, it's not going to happen by just wishing it will happen. You've got to create opportunities, create work down here, and they're there. And I know it's expensive to get across the border, but you grow good raspberries, or good blueberries, or good cherries, and there are another dozen other things that could be grown. Really good ones, late when the mainland doesn't have that product, or doesn't have the quality of that because it's too late in their season. You're going to get the extra margin, absolutely. And so with other things too, you've got to create the work, the opportunity, the employment, that will bring more people to the place. And I think that you're going to find by natural population growth, instead of them all leaving when they're finished their uni course or whatever, to go to the mainland, they'll stay here because there's opportunities here. But it's got to come from within, Darren, seriously.
Copulate to populate. And as you grow the community, all of the other things will come. These are all base fundamentals, and you know, think of how the pioneers that came to Tasmania, how they got on. They worked through the process of getting their goods across to the mainland and something. Frank's right. It's a long time since I've seen the campaign of Made in Tasmania. No contamination. All the good things. The top advertising man could get a premium on every piece of produce that went into the mainland. They're some of the fundamental things that you've got. You people take them for granted because that's the way they are. the people of Tasmania. And when you look at 160,000 workers, how many people are in Greater Geelong today, Frankie?
290.
So everybody's got their problems, but you've got to work out how to overcome them. You know, I'd still be driving a truck if I didn't look at a better way of doing it. It's true. And one of the good things about having a tough start, my father was a truck driver and we lived in a little 15-foot frontage house. But what a great education. It was a happy home. And you've got to create those types of environments all the way through your place and you'll make a huge difference.
Thanks, Lindsay, and thanks, Frank. My name's Frank Costa. I'm involved with a number of organisations in Tasmania, and I was particularly taken, Frank, by your comments about Geelong and the impact of the football club in Geelong, and happily, through a partnership with the Hobart City Council, and the name that's here was Lord Mayor and TT Line and the RACT were able to get Melbourne to play 2 games here, and the economic benefit from that's going to be enormous, and so I endorse those comments, and hopefully over time we're going to get more games here, and our objective is in fact to get a Tasmanian team at the end of the day. I've been working hard on that for a long time, going right back as far as Ian Collins. And Lindsay, you remember Colo. Colo's the most difficult person to deal with I've ever come across, but happily we're at that point, and I think, Frank, we're going to reap the benefits from that association going forward. Lindsay, you talked about the pulp mill, Rio Tinto, Temco, or BHP Billiton, the impact they have on founding the economy in Tasmania. Currently, we've got this debate about the pulp mill, and when you look at Tasmania, a good friend of mine here, Nick Saunders, who's the Vice President of the Metal Industry Association, and I'm involved with that organisation as well, he sent me a map about a week or so ago, I think it was, Nick, where we looked at Tasmania in 2000 with its national parks and reserves, and we look at Tasmania in 2012, and the growth in resources locked up is staggering. It's mind-blowing. And as a person involved in the Metal Industry Association, I despair when I hear mums and dads, firms that are involved in fabricating can no longer afford to employ people because we've locked up the state, and we're a victim of the government at the moment, which doesn't seem to recognise those particular problems. My question to you, though, in terms of BHP, Billiton, and Rio Tinto, is that they are very much looking, as a lot of other companies are, looking at their input cost equation. Can't do much about the global market, can't do much about the Australian dollar, but they're looking at their input costs. And without question, freight is the biggest input cost that's impacting on their business, to the extent that, as you rightly mentioned, to go from here, from Tasmania to Melbourne, about 50% or more is the water component, and they just cannot compete. They cannot compete because the shipping isn't available to do that. And what we are asking from people like yourself, with your association with Simon Crean and others, is to give Tasmania a fair go in the context of getting some freight equalisation. We've got freight equalisation, but it's not at the level where we need it to be. We need support to get our industry here on an equal footing with our mainland counterparts. And that's the sort of assistance that we can look to you with your profile and your connections to push that barrier. We're not looking for a handout, we're not looking for a subsidy, but I get really, really angry when I look at the sort of money that goes into road funding, the Bruce Highway, for instance, the Pacific Highway, right around the country, massive amounts of money being put into this sort of infrastructure. We haven't got a road. What we have is a piece of water, and we get $120 million a year for that as a subsidy, and then it tells it to go away. It really gets up my nose. Thank you.
Let me tell you that while you have a $120 million subsidy to cover the canal between here and the mainland, I pay $2.2 million a week excise for my fuel. And all of that money was supposed to go to roads. goes into consolidated revenue. And there are so many things that we need today in Australia in the name of infrastructure. You go to Abu Dhabi and Dubai, there's an 8-lane freeway in each direction. This morning, driving out Essendon Airport, there was 3 lanes of traffic in each direction, and both of them were car parks. So from the city all the way to Essendon Airport and all the way to Tullamarine, a car park taking up virtually 6 lanes of traffic. Abu Dhabi, they've got 8 running each way, but they don't use any more than 2. They're geared up for the future. They talk about not going into debt in the federal government. How many of you had to buy your first house and have no debt? The freeway, the Southeastern Freeway, was put in by Roach Brothers 20 years ago for $16 million. Today, they spend something like $500 million on trying to put another lane on each side. So why the hell they don't have somebody doing some analysis in real terms of what does it cost to borrow and what does it cost to add to in 3, 5, or 10 years. I've just completed a $70 million warehouse in Western Australia for the mining industry. 750,000 square feet for the 4 major miners. We opened last Wednesday. We need to start next week on 1.5 times bigger than that construction that we did and just completed. Now that's the same thing with freeways. They have them, but they don't make them big enough for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years out. Infrastructure running from here to the mainland, there has to be something, or not so much an equalisation system, but maybe what they do in East Germany and West Germany, where there might be incentives of free land for warehouses and facilities. The chief executive today of Woolworths is a Tasmanian. How often has he been down and had been locked into one of these lunches? He's a terrific bloke. Well, okay, today he controls probably 30% of all the retail grocery in Australia. You should be kissing him on the backside. But there's some of the fundamentals, building up the relationships. And, you know, I'm not a Tasmanian, and I don't know what the relationships are. But you've got to have your forum on the mainland that's working on your behalf so that you can push some of these things through. It's been done before, it can be done again.
Okay, there's a couple more questions. Can you keep your questions concise so everybody has a chance to ask questions, because we do have limited time. Thank you.
I will indeed. Thanks, Neil, but I will do a very quick introduction, if I may. Robert Wallace, former CEO of TCCI. And firstly to Frank and to Lindsay, when we met back in January for lunch, and I invited you to come down to address us after you gave me, particularly Frank, your position on how you helped to assist reinvigorate the Geelong community. And also with Lindsay, working in so many regional areas around Australia, and was able to, this may sound negative, but he had to get his arse into gear to be able to service that community. So he knows what were the hard questions, the hard core that was needed to develop regional communities. So a very personal thank you from our initial meeting and lunch in January for coming down. Just listening to you both, there's 3 key things which have been on my heart for about the last 3 months, and that's relationship, integrity and trust. And they've been built in and around your discussion today. And Lindsay in particular, you just really pitched that. But earlier, when Frank was talking about what he did for and assisted those in Geelong, it was all built around relationship, integrity and trust. I also had the fortune of meeting Lindsay and Simon Crean and the KFC group 8 years ago in Burnie, and we put our name to the tag, and I think we came up with about 60 jobs, which for North East Tasmania at that stage was very good. And so your position really is very much of, a lot of people here wouldn't understand, but your position is from an understanding of what are the true needs of an individual region, but knowing that each individual region is distinct. It isn't a cookie cutter module. So my question to both of you, and the answer may be the same from both of you, but what are the critical things that need to be done to build a strong and healthy community?
Sure, thanks. Well, I did mention when I was down here in January, one of the major things that really helped us with Geelong was that a friend of mine, and a friend of Lindsay's also, a guy named Jack Morgan, was at that time chairman of the committee for Melbourne. And we were discussing Geelong's plight. This was sort of late 1990s. And he said, why don't you get off your backside, Frank, and start a committee for Geelong? Get the right people involved, get every major business to become your members. Don't get 1 cent from government, so you can completely run free of any affiliation and make things happen for Geelong. Now, he really stirred my conscience up. So I did that, and I went and got a fellow that I thought was the right person to chair it, who just sold his business recently and had a fair bit of get up and going, and had pretty strong connections with governments both sides. He'd been very heavily involved in the art world. And we went up to Melbourne, we visited with the CEO as well as the chairman of the committee for Melbourne, learned how they operated, and we got it going. And we've now got about 130 businesses, all the major employers as members. They form the board, and it runs very strongly. We've had the same CEO now, he's in his 11th year, a chap named Peter Dorling, who had great government experience as well as an understanding of the size of the challenge and what you need to do. And they have made a lot of things happen. They put pressure on government. We go to Canberra twice a year. And when I say we, I don't necessarily mean the Committee for Geelong, they organise it, but it includes the City of Greater Geelong, the Mayor and CEO, Geelong Football Club, G21, and there's about one other organisation later on. We go up in force, we march down those aisles in Canberra, they know we're coming. And Canberra now knows more about Geelong than it does about any other city, including the big capital cities, having an impact in their operation. And our local member for North Geelong, federal member Richard Miles, started what was called Fed Cats in Canberra for us. And the first function we had, we brought up the coach, I think at the time, the CEO of Geelong. We had 20 of the federal members that were keen Geelong supporters. It went right through the place, truly with such enthusiasm. The next year when we ran it, we had 40. The third year we had 120. We had all Western Collingwood, everybody there. They just love it. And footy's an enormous icebreaker. You can crash through any sort of tense or uneasy barrier through footy. It's an equaliser for everybody. So that sort of happening for Geelong started to get a lot of things. We got the money for the highway upgrade between Melbourne and Geelong. We're all talking about how important it is to be able to move quickly and cheaply. And that highway upgrade was fantastic. Then we got a ring road going right around Geelong, take all the big trucks, etc. The traffic wasn't wanting to come to Geelong away, around to the surf coast. We're working very hard to try and help Lindsay get Avalon Airport up to where it should be. We are so lucky in Victoria to have a second airport so close to Melbourne of the quality of Avalon that Sydney would give their eye teeth if they had that opportunity. But governments won't move unless they get more and more pressure from the right people, I suppose. And so we're trying to make that happen for us as well. But we have to keep working in Geelong. The fact that we've gone from such a huge unemployment level to below 5% is fantastic for today, but that can change tomorrow. Alcoa could close, Ford could close, or move to Broadmeadows, and suddenly we've got less jobs there, so we've got to keep building up everything else. So I reckon, and I did say it at the time, I think, well, we should be starting a committee for Hobart probably, maybe a committee for Tasmania, I'm not sure. But getting all of your forces together to join that committee, pay a reasonable membership so that you don't have to ask government for any money, and then just go for it.
I think one of the most important things today in any community, in any region in Australia, is jobs. Work, income to maintain the family, because if you don't have that, you don't have much at all. Let me give you a quick snap of what's happening in Australia today. We employ 24,000 people in 11 countries. On the east coast of Australia, in the last 12 months, we've employed one person. In the northwest of Western Australia, we've put on 500. In Southeast Asia, we've put on 3,500. Analyse that. The east coast of Australia today, with the exception of the mining area in Queensland, has become a rust bucket, and most of those jobs in manufacturing, or all of the particular regions that specialised in one aspect of commerce, those jobs have gone to low-cost Asian countries where people can get the goods for maybe a tenth of the price. Now, Western Australia is quite incredible. Western Australia is no different to what it was like in the gold rush days in the 1800s. We have truck drivers currently making $165,000 a year and $1,500 a week to sleep in their air-conditioned truck. And we can't get enough trucks or drivers to do the jobs. This is one of the things that makes a community when you get a lot of people that need work or have got work. That's how regional Australia started. There was either wool, there was meat, there was dairy produce. There were goods that were being exported out of regional Australia. And Tasmania is more regional Australia than probably any other part of the nation. But they were the fundamentals that created these locations, and today they're disintegrating. Regional Australia, unless it gets a big boost from industry to have things manufactured, give land from local communities for retailers to build warehouses so that it creates jobs within those communities, which will in turn create so many additional houses. So there's so much more in the way of services to look after those people that are going to come and work in that region. Now, that is no different to the forefathers of Tasmania 100 years ago. But we're faced with a difficulty today which the world probably has only seen once in the last 100 years, which was the global financial turn down. And you know, we're right on the brink again. We just don't know what's going to happen in Europe. Things are varying day by day. People are going broke. Institutions that you never thought would. But you've got to bypass all of those things and say, well, okay, my house is in order, our community's in order, and this is what we're going to do, and this is where we're going. Plan it, and it's amazing what you can do. If you decide that you're going to go overseas for a holiday in 6 months' time or next year, you start planning now. But you can't sort of plan to do miraculous things tomorrow if you haven't been planning these things for the last 6 months or 12 months. Because the wheels of progress take a hell of a lot longer to turn than they do to be ready to do something in 24 hours.
We have time for one more question.
Hi, my name is Danielle Collin. I'm a lawyer, so hearing this is my hopefully very succinct question, and that is time. You've alluded to it several times during your speech, but I was wondering if you could just very briefly say in one sentence or less, when do we invest in Tasmania? Now, I've come back after being away for 5 years. I'm here, I'm ready to invest, yay Tas. But, and you know, born and bred, whatever. But I've got economists, financial people in my year telling me, Danielle, bunker down, 2014, 2015, then get your dollars out. In the meantime, invest in the US, you know, steer away from gold, don't take out any loans, and similarly, my clients in businesses I'm seeing doing the same thing. So, is now the right time to actually be investing in Tasmania, or should we be being in the paralysis by analysis, doing the thinking, doing the planning, and then getting ready for when the economy starts to turn and we get a little bit more political stability?
Tough times create great opportunities. In 1961, which was known then as the credit squeeze, but I'm a lot older than most of you here, and that was like our first complete financial downturn. And in that period, I had 100% growth in my company. I went from 1 truck to 2. And every financial downturn that I have been involved in, our business has grown because of the opportunities that are created. Now, you go and look at something that you can buy for 75 cents on the dollar today, and that's probably getting close to the mark. You can go to Queensland and buy places at Surfers Paradise for probably 65 cents in the dollar. You can buy apartments in Western Australia today for something like 70 cents on the dollar, and least that the mining companies have got to pay $600 a night for an ordinary hotel room. In the Pilbara, they're paying $2,500 a week for a 2-bedroom fibro cement house. So there are opportunities, but you've got to keep your eyes open, you've got to go and have a look, and act as you would if you were a Scotsman.
Unfortunately, time limits us, so we're going to have to bring it to a close now. And I've got a couple of chores. One is to...
Excuse me, Neil. Can we just hear from Frank? I think Frank was about to respond.
Sure. Well, I'll try and do it in one sentence.
Good old Collingwood.
No, that's not the club you want to invest in, Lindsay.
How does that song go, Frankie?
We are Geelong, the greatest team of all. And we've been
Come on.
the greatest team of all. We are Geelong, coming up. We are on the ball. I won't keep going. To answer the question, when is the best time to invest? Look, first of all, you've got to know what you're investing in. You've got to know the company you're going to invest in. And you've got to absolutely know that the product that they're working on has got a future. And that's, yeah, and they've got the right people actually running it. And if that's correct, well then you invest. It's a bit like the weather. You don't know when the next uplift is going to come or when the next downturn is going to come. But good people with a good organisation, with a good product, carry through. And so therefore, if you put your money into something that you know is right, then just stay with it. You don't try and buy and sell out of it, just stay with it. So I'd just say, look for the right company in Tassie, make sure that their people are good, look for those little things that we all talk about, but they are very absolutely important, like your integrity, your trust, the loyalty of the people in the company and what have you, and just stay with it. But I reckon Tassie's got a great future, and if you truly take it by the scruff of the neck and run with it, you'll be amazed 5 to 10 years from now what you've got here in this state of Tassie. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Frank, and apologies for cutting you off, and appreciate the prompt. Thank you. We've got a couple of prizes here to, if I'm going to ask Frank and Lindsay to draw a business card each, and there are a couple of bottles of wine for lucky winners.
He doesn't think I'll do it. Oh shit, what about that? I got one ANZ in this one, I've pulled an ANZ in that one. I want a 0.5% reduction.
And the winner is James Brooks, Relationship Manager Business One that Frank Brawl, Marie Davis, General Sales Manager, Southern Cross Australia.
Yours is better looking than mine.
You don't rust until you wait and make sure.
So that leaves me to wrap up with a number of thank yous. First, to all of you who came along today for supporting TCCI and taking the time to hear our speakers. Secondly, to ANZ Bank for sponsoring the lunch. Without our sponsors, we can't do these sort of events. But most importantly, to our two special guests, Frank Costa and Lindsay Fox, for interesting words, interesting comments, enjoyable comments. We really do appreciate your contribution. Thank you very much for coming. And with that, we bring formalities to a close. I hope you have a chance to linger, have a cup of coffee and get a chance to talk around. Thank you.